Hi, I'm Curtis Millsap with Millsap Farm. I'm here at Farmers Market of the Ozarks today to talk about how we run a farmers market, why we've done it, and our history with farmers markets over the years. Our farm, Millsap Farm, has been selling at this market for 14 years. We'll talk a little bit about how we present, how we interact with our customers, the pros and cons of selling at market, and a couple of details, the really nuggets of valuable information on how to set your farm up for success at the market. Well, thanks for coming. I'm Curtis, by the way. So I'll give you the skinny on how our farm has marketed over the years, and specifically within the context of the farmers market, but then we'll look wider as well, because we don't do just the farmers market. It's just one leg of really probably a 2- or 3-legged stool. So we started selling at farmers markets. Greater Springfield Farmers Market was our original market back in spring of 2008, I think it was. And at that time, Greater Springfield was, it was certainly the biggest market in Springfield, and it was almost the only. Commercial Street, I think, started that summer, so that was maybe their first season. Although C Street's been on and off over the decades, but it was a tiny little market. That season, we did Greater Springfield, C Street Market, Fairgrove, Willard. I think that might have been the 4. And then a couple of those we went twice a week. So I think Greater Springfield, we were doing the Thursday market and the Saturday market, and Fairgrove was a Wednesday, and Willard was a Saturday afternoon, so we'd go to Greater Springfield in the morning, and then, so we were hitting all those things, and with the idea being that, you know, if each of them could be a few $100s, then it would add up. And what we decided after that year was that, one, we either had to market or grow, you know, most of the time, and we didn't have, well, I enjoy growing a lot more than marketing. I think most farmers feel that way. And so that was one kind of vote for less marketing and more farming. And then the other thing I realized was, you know, those other markets, we weren't really making that much. So, and just to put, like, you know, teeth to that, if we went to a midweek market, it was uncommon for us to make more than $300. Well, you harvest, pack everything up, haul yourself there, stand there for 3 or 4 hours, pack everything up, haul it home, wear and tear on the machines and yourself, and you know, and to me, it became evident pretty quickly, I could do other things to earn that $300 that I'd rather be doing. I mean, I'd rather go work at Krispy Kreme than stand at market and not sell stuff, you know, 3 or 4 days a week. And it wasn't we weren't selling stuff at all, but it just was small amounts. So we either had to figure out other reasons to be at those places. So for a while we pared our farmers market attendance down to, I think, 2 markets the next year, but we did also start doing CSA deliveries at the markets as well. And that helped, because then we're there, I mean, we're gonna drop off, you know, have exchanges with $150 worth of CSA member pickups, plus whatever we're doing, or, you know, it escalated over the years. So that helps. But then eventually we got to the point where really Greater Springfield was so clearly a bigger moneymaker. I mean, yeah, originally Greater Springfield, and then we transitioned to this market after a few years. We were clearly making way more money in that than we could ever make in those other markets, and we said, well, and this also, our kids were great, you know, we're having more kids, and we just realized time-wise, it no longer made sense for us to pursue all these little pots of money, that we really needed to just go big in one place. And usually that served us well. There's a couple of times, certainly every year, when you think, well, shoot, you know, every other day is great, but Saturday sucks, and there's nothing you can do about that. because if Saturday is a bad weather day, people just don't show up. I mean, today is, there's definitely a less crowd than there was last week. We won't sell out today because of the crowd, and you can't control that. But on the plus side, when this market's hopping, like last week, we took home $3,000, and that's the sort of income where you go, okay, now we're starting to talk about making a living. Like that starts to make sense, because if we're going to be here, I mean, even on a bad day anymore, we're still going to be over 1,000, and that's a number that makes me think like that's worth doing. The other thing we love about the market that we really didn't understand until we were there for a while was it's a fantastic way to connect with people. So, the social media and websites and emails and all those things are really powerful tools, but the most powerful one is always face-to-face. And it's the most, it's the first point of contact for a lot of people. They're going to come and see you at the market and go, oh, Millsap Farm, I wonder, and then they're going to look us up on Facebook or on Instagram or whatever, and so then it's a way for us to, shake a hand, I guess, in a sense, and start telling our story to them. And that's really, now, well, every year we have this discussion about whether we still want a farmer's market because of those rainy days and because it's a Saturday morning, and it's like, we have other things we'd rather be doing on a Saturday morning than hauling all our stuff here and setting it up and selling stuff. But it always comes down to two things for us. One is that it is that point of contact. So it's the way a lot of people are going to first interact with us, and then they're going to possibly come to pizza night, maybe come out to the farm to a farm stand visit, buy a CSA share eventually. That's often the way that sort of stair step of marketing works for us. This is first contact, and they keep going up in terms of what they're going to spend with us and what value they're going to bring to our business. And then the second one is, and this one will connect with you as well, but it was a way for our kids to experience retail. And not like McDonald's retail. I want them to experience face-to-face retail. How do you interact with somebody and tell your story and sell something to them in a way that's not cheesy or unethical or anything, but in a way that adds, presents them with something that they will use, that's useful to them and good for them, and you get this, it gives this real immediate feedback loop of that person bought something from me, that person didn't, what did I do differently? And you very quickly learn to, your pattern. And we'll talk a little about what that is and how that works. But that was a big thing for us because, we got a bunch of kids, we realized that statistically, at some point, they're all going to have to work retail, or almost all of them, right? And if they know how to do that well, then they're going to be good employees or good entrepreneurs or whatever it is. So we've stayed partly because of that, because we think there's value there for them, and for interns as well. So Carissa's an intern with us. Well, she was an intern last year. This year we'll call her farmhand, but she has, and all our interns learn so much about that interaction and how to do that. And some people are naturally gifted at it, and other people it takes a long time to figure out how to do it. But either way, if you spend enough time in this milieu, eventually you can figure out, like, if I don't do this, things don't sell. If I do this, things sell. And so this is a great learning platform too. So anyway, we've been here at this market then, I guess, for right around 10 years now. So Farmers Market of the Ozarks kind of sprang out of Greater Springfield because of our desire for a pavilion. So most of us who are over there love the market, but it's on a mall parking lot, as you know. And so, I would show up, this is the huge downside of markets in general, but I would show up the first market, back when it was not a year-round market, show up the first market of the season with basil plants, and lettuce mix, and it would be 20 degrees and the wind's blowing sideways. And you're like, not only am I not going to sell this stuff, it's going to be the compost by the end of the day. And literally, the first market we ever went to, it snowed sideways. I'm like, wow, welcome to your farming entrepreneurship. So that was when they started talking about putting in a year-round pavilion. We were on board right away, and that's what drove our change to here. This is a very different market. which it took us several years to understand what was going on. Greater Springfield is very much it's an old style farmer's market. People roll in with their trucks, they're parked right there on the lot. It has, at least unless it's changed, and I haven't been there, in a while, but when we were there a lot, it was very much a traditional farmer's market customer base as well. A lot of older people, a lot of people looking for large quantities of things, wanting to have value in terms of how much they wanted to spend versus what they were going to get. This market is much more of a destination market in the sense of someplace people are going to go and hang out. So there's food trucks, there's coffee, there's this sort of, there's music, and a lot of the vendors, as you look around, are not your more traditional market vendors. I'm looking at Springfield Brewing Company and thinking that's an example of like when they came to the market the first time. I was like, what? That's kind of weird. Like that's a farmer's market thing, but that's what our market is it's really someplace people go to hang out. They're going to spend a couple hours here. When I work the booth, you'll see somebody walk through at 9 o'clock, and then they'll come back through at 11:30. And what they've done is they've come in and they've kind of walked the loop. Maybe they've gone and had breakfast. Maybe they sat out here and had something out of the food truck, and they visited with friends, and then they come through and maybe buy something. So that's good and bad from a sales perspective. On the one hand, it does help us understand how to tailor our sales. So things like a bulk bag of stuff here doesn't necessarily motivate buyers. What motivates buyers here is something that is convenient and simple, and they can take it home and put it in a salad bowl, and it's going to be edible. I don't think this is a place where you're going to sell 50-pound bags of potatoes, but you can sell a little quart of cool, colorful potatoes for $5, right? And so figuring out that market and then how that connects with how you're going to sell, that was part of what we figured out as we transitioned to here, because the other market really was. I don't know if Mike still does this, but Mike, has lost his last name, the guy at Mike Campbell, yeah, Campbell Farms. He used to literally show up with pickup truck loads of green beans. And I'm like, how do I compete with that? I can't, I'm here with my little quarts of green beans, and he's there with a pickup truck load of them. It's just a different approach to what we're doing. And so this market works well for us in that regard. We're kind of a high price point generally, and part of that is because we are on a very small footprint. Mike farms 20 acres, and he's got an acre of green beans getting harvested every couple of weeks. I'm not going to do that. That's not my footprint. That's not my mechanical style. I'm really grateful that there are people out there doing that, but as a high tunnel, and I only grow 2.5 acres of vegetables, I need to get top dollar, and so I'm aiming at specialty products that have short shelf life, that have maybe a very niche demand, but that demand is excited. So, for example, we raise these purple daikon radishes, also black Spanish radishes, a couple other winter radishes that are relatively easy to raise, but they're unusual enough. You're not going to grow. There's no point in growing 6 tons of them. You're never going to sell that many of them. So we grow a couple beds of them each year, but we sell them all winter long. And some people will come along and buy a bunch of them, but most people are going to try 2 or 3 of them, and that's going to be a weekly thing. They're going to buy two purple daikon from us all winter long. And so if you're trying to make money, make an income selling just daikons, of course that's not going to work. But if you can add a bag of salad to that and a bundle of carrots and things, as long as we're at the price point that we need, then that works for us here. I don't know if that was very clear, but I feel like there is a distinction there between those types of markets, and this is how we ended up. It's not how we moved here, but that's what we realized after we were here for a while, was this is the kind of market we're doing. So, and then the flowers also, are a good example of something that works really well in this market, where you've got a lot of people doing Instagram, a lot of people, they're here for the experience as much as the product, and flowers are a great experience thing, because even if you didn't come here to necessarily buy anything, you can see those flowers and you're like, I can take those home. I know what to do with those, And so our coffee drinkers and strollers almost always are our flower buyers. So anyway, sorry, that's sort of the big picture view of what I think, how I think this market works. Now, a couple of things, and I think how to best do this. Well, we'll walk through in a minute, but let's talk a little bit about what I think makes a very effective sales pitch at a market. So people buy, my sister taught me this. My sister worked retail, and my sister is a perfectionist, extremely intelligent, so everything she does I listen to because she understands what she's doing. She tells me people buy from their belly button to their eyeballs. Like if it's not above this level and below that level, you're not really selling it to them. And if you go in a grocery store, you'll see this, right? I mean, the stuff down on the bottom is just bulk stuff. It's the cheapest stuff. It's the stuff they really don't care if they sell, or it's stuff they know people are going to be okay with looking for. But right here, this is where the high value stuff's going to be. So the same thing needs to happen in a farmer's market. And you can see a real diversity of ways farmers achieve that, or frankly fail to achieve it sometimes. A flat table with stuff spread on it is very unappealing. It just doesn't have any sort of pop. It doesn't make you engage with the product. So getting stuff vertical is really important. And so we do a lot of stacking. We use a lot of shelves. Our vibe is kind of rustic, floral patterns and things like that. I have another friend up in Colombia who does a fabulous job. Her vibe is bushel baskets and burlap, and she does a beautiful job with it. And whatever it is, getting things stacked up is really important. And so we do the table level and then a couple of shelves, and we'll oftentimes put things in baskets or crates. In the summertime, when we have a lot of head lettuce, or late spring, we'll do a wall of lettuce. So we'll have these crates that will stuff different varieties in the crates. And the purpose of that is not so much because we need to put all that lettuce out there to sell it necessarily, but it is that people won't buy unless they can see it within their space. It can be kind of frustrating. I should probably mention that sometimes when you display that way, it means more product spoilage, because obviously stacking lettuce up in the dry is not the best way to keep it fresh. Same thing with kale. The best way to store the kale would be in an ice chest with a little water and an ice block, and yet we'll never sell kale that way. We have toyed around with some ways to fix that, which is when it's really hot, sometimes we'll bring an ice chest of cold water, and then we'll just dunk stuff occasionally. Sometimes we will spritz. We bring a spritz bottle and we'll spritz stuff, and that helps. So there's different ways to sort. Oh, and also an umbrella. Not necessary today, but on a sunny day, even when it's not that warm, if it's a sunny day, we'll get an umbrella out, because we get a lot of sunshine coming in from the east here. We get a pretty intense sun initially, and it'll cook the greens, like that. I mean, I'm sure you've seen that. It's really super frustrating to bring all these beautiful crisp greens, and an hour in the market, they all look like they've been there for 3 days. So the spritzing and the shade is the big key to that. The other thing that we've learned in terms of display is keeping it full all the time. And so the old market adage that somebody told us when we first started marketing was "Pile it high, watch it fly." And if you don't come with lots of produce to stack up, you're not going to sell lots of produce. And I see this is a really common mistake in market, is people will spread their stuff across the whole table and then it looks sparse. They've got plenty of produce there. It's not necessarily that they don't have produce, but it is that it's not, for whatever reason, and if you think about, part of this is watching ourselves and trying to, kind of step aside and watch yourself. How do you buy things? What interests you, and so on. But if you walk into a grocery store and they've got these beautiful walls of things and stacks of things, it's very compelling. You're like, oh yeah, they've got 10,000 oranges. I want 10. And there's this sense of abundance, and the abundance draws us in and makes us want to participate in it. I don't know what that's about, but I know it's real, right? So we stack it high, watch it fly. And that means, again, you're going to have a little spoilage from that. But I don't really mind if I take 100 heads of lettuce and I sell 80 of them and I lose 20 of them to wilt. That's still way better than me taking 50 and selling 25, So there's kind of this thing where the more you take, the more you sell. And so that was one big thing we learned about display. Stack it high, and you'll see that in our display. And the other corollary to that is it always needs to look full. So the other thing we will often do if we have a limited amount of produce, it just say we've harvested what we've got, and it's, it fills the table initially, but then over time the table starts to diminish. We'll start condensing our display to keep it always looking full and abundant. And so we have found that if we don't do that, those last 10 heads of lettuce never sell. But if you cram them onto one little table, so it's like a postage stamp of a table, but it's piled high, people will come and buy those last 8 heads. It's hard to sell the last 2. You got to really have the last couple are always difficult. But that's a big display key, is condensing your display as you sell your product, or having enough restock to always keep it full. So the other thing that I find is really a useful tool in terms of display and interaction, which we're kind of starting to think about how to interact with customers as well, is fiddling with your stuff. You don't need to, but if you don't do it, stuff doesn't sell. So you're out there in your booth, instead of standing behind your table, and you'll see this with a lot of farmers marketers, they're standing behind their table, and they've got everything in place. It's fine, it all looks good. But they're back behind their table like, okay, now y'all come and buy my stuff. Here I am, I'm ready to do business. And you can sell stuff that way, but I sell a lot more stuff by being out in here, interacting, and I'm not interacting in a way like, do you want to buy something? I'm interacting in I'm here, I'm piddling with the carrots, but I can turn to you and say, is there anything you'd like today? Are you looking for anything in particular? So there's a lot of those little things that work a lot better if you've got something in your hands working. That one's, I don't know, that's a really hard one for people to learn sometimes, because they feel like they want to turn on, do you have something? And almost all of us are like, no, this is a fight or flight reflex, right? Somebody turns and faces you and asks you a direct question, the immediate answer is no, and I'm gone. But this is a more casual, somebody come up on my shoulder, they don't feel threatened in any way, and I've got my back to them, but I'm not ignoring them. And they know that, but they also can see what I'm doing. They know that, and also, if you want to, if you really want to fine tune it, then you piddle with the things that you really want to sell, because those things it's going to draw people's attention. Oh, that is beautiful lettuce, and you can say that too. You can say, oh, yeah, we got some beautiful lettuce here today, and people will say, oh yeah, well, I'll take a head of that. So, so part of that interaction is the initiation of that, and part of that is constantly being out piddling with your stand. Now, what I like to do, if I have the staff to do it, I like to piddle and mingle, and then I like to have somebody run the cash register. So what that does is that gives them a point of contact, sort of the way of interacting with us initially, but then it also gives them really clear, where am I going after this? Where do I go to pay? People don't like ambiguity, and so having a clear way to connect, and then what's my next step, and then what's my exit strategy? They need those things. I should mention, I forgot to mention this before, pricing is so important. Not necessarily what you're pricing things at, that matters, but we'll come back to that. That doesn't matter very much, but people knowing what the price is super important. And you'll see this one too. This is actually one of my biggest pet peeves at market, is as a customer as well. I don't want to go into a market and have to ask people how much stuff is. I just think that's not very considerate of your customer. I mean, you don't do that at Walmart. If something doesn't have a price tag on it at Walmart, I certainly don't haul it up to the register and ask them to check me out before I find out what it's worth, right? So you mark everything, and you mark it a couple times if you have to. Over the years we've gone through different permutations of that. We are currently using these little, I don't even know what to call them. They're little clips that clip onto things, and then you can put a card in them. We've done stands that have chalk on them. We've done all different versions of this. We wanted to have that balance between looking professional enough that they believe you're serious about selling it, but also rustic enough that they believe you're a farmer. Everything's printed and slick. It's a different presentation. So anyway, that's important. And there's a lot of different ways of accomplishing that. I know people who use a giant chalkboard, write everything on the chalkboard. That works for them. I like to have a price by everything. And it's something I didn't mention before, but in the interest of keeping things full, sometimes I'll put out 2 baskets of the same thing, 2 different places, because one, I want a full stand, and if all I've got is spinach, then I'm gonna make the spinach fill the stand. But also because people don't know how to look for things, and so people will walk into the stand and say, "Where's the spinach?" Or "Do you have any spinach today?" And say, "Well, there, and there." And I feel like the more times you present it, the more likely it is that they're gonna see it and buy it. So, but then each of those will need a tag. You don't want to put one price tag on the spinach and they say, "How much is the spinach?" Because they're looking at this spinach over here. So, tags everywhere there's product. If you've got multiple products out, multiple versions of the same product out, multiple tags, whatever the case. So that's key. So we talked about display. We talked about then piddling with the display. So let's visit about interaction then. So we kind of visited about that. I think finding a way to non-threateningly interact with your customers is really important. Squaring up with somebody is never a good idea, unless and now if it's a friend and now you've got a rapport, that's different. But if it's somebody, it's just threatening to square up with some stranger. And so body language is important. Figuring out how you want to be approached, how you would want to approach somebody, thinking about, as you make your way through farmers markets. Farmers markets are a great place to be educated on how to sell or how not to sell. And one of the things you notice is some people are really easy to approach. And it's usually because they are paying attention to you, but they are not staring at you. They are ready to talk with you, but they're not demanding you talk with them. And so what does that look like specifically? When I am at a booth, one thing that helps me a lot in my interaction is I want to look like a farmer. So I'm going to dress like a farmer. I don't wear overalls every day of the week. I wear overalls quite a bit, but I'll never be at market without my overalls because that's a farmer, right? Our staff, they will dress like farmers. The other thing we do is we always wear an apron. And aprons help. We have an apron that has Millsap Farm logo on it. They're all the same color, so everybody knows who's with our stand. I think that's really powerful, especially since we have a real revolving cast of helpers. And so if they're wearing a green apron, that's the Millsap Farm helper, and they can help you. So make it easy for your customer that way. The other thing one of the other things that I think really matters in that initial interaction and how they know who to talk to and so on is greeting them. It gets really wearisome. How many different ways can you say, "How's your morning going? Good to see you. Beautiful weather we're having. Boy, isn't it cold out?" And so what I find when I work a market is I usually end up with 1 or 2 lines, and that's whatever that is for the day. I'm going to repeat that 10,000 times. But if you don't repeat it, you won't draw that person in. They won't connect with you in the same way. And so you can watch this happen. It's a really great thing to observe. But if you can catch people out of a crowd doing that. People who otherwise weren't going to stop, they may kind of take a glance over at you, but they're trying not to interact, right? So they're kind of glancing, but they're not going to stop. But you non-threateningly say, "How are you doing this morning?" Or "Good to see you," or the weather's lovely. Yes.
What the difference?
Yeah. So changing your approach based on who you're dealing with, right? So know your audience is always the first rule of public speaking, and this is a form of public speaking. So I think that doing some prediction of what people are going to be interested in helps. I also think understanding that how I'm going to interact with an older male versus a young lady taking Instagram photos, I'm going to be sensitive to that a little bit. But I also think that to some degree you can develop sort of a vanilla, like, "Glad you're out here today." That's not threatening to anybody, and it's generic enough that you aren't really gonna you're not gonna step over any weird boundaries or anything that way. Now, will I, what I'm going to be looking for then immediately is what are they interested in, and how can I facilitate that interest to help them find what they're looking for. I also love interacting with their kids. I think every parent appreciates it when somebody notices their child. And so that obviously is different. I mean, if somebody doesn't have a child, they're not going to do that. I think most college-age girls, this is stereotyping, but most college-age girls aren't that interested in talking to you about the weather. Almost any 60-year-old man really wants to talk to you about the weather. He's into that. So that's a difference that you're going to observe and be. But it's a great place to just learn about people too, because you have, the great thing about a farmer's market is you've got, on any given day, several hundred opportunities to try this out. To say something to somebody that flopped. They were not at all impressed with what I just said to them, or they weren't interested at all in connecting with me. Wonder why that was. Can I do something different that would work better next time? And you get another chance. 10 seconds later, you're going to have another chance. And if frankly, farm markets can be a little boring. This is a great way to keep yourself entertained, right? Missed that one, I'm going to get the next one. And it's kind of a fun game to play with yourself. So, but it's educational, right? You're learning how to do this. Other things, that's a good question, Patrick. I was trying to think specifically other ways that I would change my interaction. Gardening is another touch point that a lot of people want to connect with you on, but then some people won't, right? So being aware that there's not one, once you get beyond that initial, hi, how are you? Or isn't it a great day today? Or so glad to have you here. Then you really need to, if you're going to continue that conversation at all, you got to start looking and trying to understand what they're interested in and not just project your interest into them. So the question is, do we have sort of leading questions that we can go with? And then, so my chief leading question is, are you looking for anything in particular today? So now that's pretty vague, and I like it vague because if I say, are you interested in my spinach? Then it's an easy no. But it's less of that, and it says, I'm interested in what you want out of this. So you're making yourself of service. How can I help you today? Now, how can I help you? I feel a little more invasive. Is there anything in particular you're looking for, or are you looking for anything special today? Those are really easy questions. People are like, oh yeah, I thought maybe I'd get some carrots. That doesn't obligate them to buy your carrots. It just tells you they're looking for something. And then that's a real simple way, and that doesn't get you in a deep, involved conversation either. Because you are right. The other issue with connecting with people is we've got to make in a market setting, we can't connect for too long. We've got to be ready to disconnect in a fairly timely manner, because if we connect for 10 minutes with each customer, we're only going to make would that be about 12 sales in 2 hours? That's not really going to work. We got to make it more like a 20 to 30 second interaction with each customer if we want to really keep the process working. So, and then the other thing along those lines is, if we do, because an old friend will come by, or somebody really has some questions, and you want to serve them, you want to help them. Part of my goal of having multiple staff in a booth is so that I can do that, so I can step off and build a real relationship with this person who really wants to connect to us, and that's good and worthwhile, as long as I have somebody else who's going to continue to sell product in the stand. And that's important. We can't just spend our whole time socializing, but at the same time, I like to make sure that there's enough flexibility that I can be intentional about connecting with at least a few people each market. My kids and staff make fun of me because when I come to market, I try and be really intentional about bringing at least one extra person when I come, because I recognize that about myself. I'm going to do that. So anyway, yeah, it is. so that is there anything in particular or anything special you're looking for today? That's a really great, vague, but it gives them, like I say, it just gives them that connection that says, he wants to help me. Or how can I help you today? That's okay. I just think you kind of got to, I don't know, you got to develop your own comfort with that and figure out whether you can say that in a way that doesn't make people feel like now they have to interact with you. So anyway, low pressure. Eye contact is an important and good thing. I had a story time. I had an intern one time who routinely was not making any money at market. I mean, he'd come home like with $50, and it was weekday markets, and he was going alone, and so we really didn't know what was going on. But we thought this isn't right. I mean, any of us would go and we'd at least bring home a couple hundred, and he's coming home with fractions of this. And finally, a CSA member said, "Hey, I don't want to tattle, but do you know that he's sitting and reading a book?" He was like sitting back. He wasn't even like facing the customer. He had his chair off. They sent us a picture. He's off like this. Like, well, I mean, who wants to interrupt somebody reading a good book? I'm not going to do that. So we got to give them enough attention to let them know that we're paying attention, but also not stare. Eye contact initially. Hey, it's good to see you today. Hope you're having a great day. And then do your piddle, right? You got these heads of lettuce that desperately need to be shuffled. And I'm gonna turn, so they're still here. They're interacting with me, but I'm not pushy. And then I can, as they engage with the stand, as they start, is there anything in particular you're looking for? Well, we got some really nice lettuce here today. And once they start down that path, now your conversation can be a lot more direct about what exactly are, you want carrots? Oh, great, we've got the cooking carrots, or we got the carrots with tops. Now, have you ever used the tops you can cook these tops. So you can get into the tips, you can get into sort of scaffolding them for success with whatever they take home. And I like that part. That's one of my favorite parts of market, is when I can tell somebody about a use for something they haven't done before that they get excited about, or they say, wow, fennel, what's with fennel? And you can say, oh man, fennel is such a great vegetable. It's really unusual in American culture, but it's pretty common in European. And our favorite way to eat it is to slice it thin and put it in a salad. You can also cook it, but I really like it raw. And that, it's short, it's concise, but it just gave them a little bit of information and a very specific piece of advice. You can slice it thin, put it in a salad, it's going to taste great. I don't want to go on, this is that 30-second rule, but I'm going to give them enough information to kind of, like I said, scaffold them for success. What am I going to do with this thing? Because nobody wants to haul home something from the market and they're like, I don't know why I bought that. I have no idea what I'm going to do with that. But then it's got this real simple rule of what to do with it. And so that's your kind of interaction with the customer. And then, and like I said, even if you don't say words, acknowledging people as they walk by, because, in some ways, farmers market, it's like you're standing by a sidewalk and you're kind of fishing out of that sidewalk. And people are just walking by. And people give you body language. Some people are going to look away. They're not interested, Some people are studying the ground. They're not interested. But there are people who are going to look at your stuff, and if you make eye contact with them, it gives them permission. I've given you some attention, and now they're going to feel free to kind of wander in. You don't even have to always say something, but just acknowledging their presence is important. So, and again, like I say, the practice for this, you get lots of practice in it, but it's also really good to walk the path a few times and just see how people interact. And you can right away tell, like, oh, this person really gets it and this person doesn't. And as you do that, and not to be, again, not to be critical of someone else, but you can learn a lot by watching what works and what doesn't for other people. And that's how we usually learn things. So okay, so that's interaction. Sales, I like keeping money in my pockets. That's part of why I wear an apron. I don't want to have to go back to the cash box every time. We have a cash box, and we always have somebody manning the cash box or right there ready to make change, because some people are just more comfortable stepping to a place to check out. But I'm really okay with just stuffing my pockets with money and making change right there. It's quick and it's easy, and if you got a full booth, it's a real time saver. Because otherwise you end up with this line at the cash box, right? And that's kind of, it's a problem. So, yeah.
So pricing, obviously, and convenience and making change.
Yes, and so for years, we tried to keep everything to even dollars or 50 cents. We have loosened up on that a little bit. We'll now do stuff at 25-cent increments, but still, I don't like making anything less than a quarter, so, but there is a big difference. So what convinced me was, if you go to market with, let's say, radishes at $2 versus radishes at $2.50, and you sell 100 bundles, that's an extra $50. That was well worth the 50 cents, even if it was a bit of a hassle to make that change. But yeah, you don't want to get into, at least I've never wanted to do odd numbers. Now, I have some friends who do that. and they will actually use a cash register usually because it gets hard to add things up if you're doing weird numbers. But you can add a lot of income to your bottom line by doing that. The debit card or a credit card can allow you to do weird pricing. I mean, what I would consider weird pricing. So $2.99 for a bundle of radishes, but they'll point out, well, that's an extra $44 over what you were going to make at $2.50. And it's with if 90% of your customers are handing you a card anyway, who cares? They don't care whether it's $2.50 or $2.99. They're not going to get any change either way. You're not going to have to make change either way. So it is changing things. Our market still tends to be about probably, I don't know, Carissa, 50-50? Is it even that high? I'm not sure there's 50% credit card customers here. It's a pretty cash-oriented market. But yeah, I think as things move more and more into that realm, that'll make more sense. The easiest way to become more profitable is always to raise your price. I mean, all you do is mark a different price. Like, that's as easy as it gets. And now, of course, there's other things about that, like will you sell as much, and will you, how much product can you bring, and all these things. But just bottom line, like if all other things being equal, if you've got 100 bundles of radishes and you're confident you're going to sell them, then selling them for $3 instead of $2 is an extra $100. And all you did was mark up the price. You didn't change anything you were doing. Making more money off a product is as easy as marking up the price, as long as you can sell it. So pricing matters a lot. Setting prices is always a hard thing. When we got started, I spent a lot of times roaming the aisles of produce sections because I wanted to understand just what something was worth in the customer perspective. So what does a bundle of beets sell for at Mama Jean's? At the time that I was doing that, it was about $3.99. Well, then I'm right in line if I'm selling them for $3.50 or $4. I'm right where I want to be. If I'm going into the market and I'm routinely seeing bundles of radishes for $1 and I'm trying to sell them for $2.50, I better have a really good reason those vegetables are worth 2.5 times what they are at the grocery store. And sometimes I do have a reason for that, but I think that's my starting point, was going to the grocery stores and looking. Then over the years we developed also trying to understand our profitability per crop, and that's a really hard thing to nail down initially, but over time we got to the point where we could say, well, this is how long this takes us to grow, package, and get out the door. And so then, given that time frame, because time is almost always the measurement that you can, one, it's kind of the hardest thing to capture, but it's almost always the biggest money suck, or is how much time did it take you to do this. Then that's a good way to gauge. So the rule of thumb for us right now is we need to be able to harvest and prep $100 worth of product per person per hour. So if I can't harvest and prep $100 worth of radishes in an hour, I need to raise the price of radishes or grow less radishes. I mean, sometimes there's just products you're not going to get to that on, but $100 an hour is our metric, and that's just the harvest and prep. That's not anything to do with the growing or any of that beforehand. It's just when I leave the farm stand with a crate to go pick this to when I'm putting that crate in the cooler, that hour I should make $100, or should have $100 worth of product prepared. That's a great rule of thumb, easy to use. It's not a perfect rule of thumb, obviously, but it is what it is. It's helpful, and so that's one thing we do. The other thing is I never want to undercut another vendor. I'm not at all interested in being a low price leader. I want to be right at the top or in that upper echelon every time. And part of that's because I'm not going to bring in truckloads of green beans, and part of it is because we use organic practices, and so that should bring a premium to the market. And part of it is because we do a really good job of presenting our product. All my helpers are willing to talk to them however long they want to talk. I mean, we're not going to shove them off, even if we know, ooh, that was a 10-minute sale, that was a zinger. But we're never going to be rude to them. So we're bringing a lot of value there, because there are, you're not going to get that from the Walmart produce manager. Like, there's just nobody in Walmart that's going to sit and talk to you for 10 minutes about gardening. And fair enough, right? That's not what they're there for, but that is what we're here for in my market booth. It's not even what all the farmers market folks are here for, but that's important. So that adds value. One of the things that's helped with us the last couple years is there's now a lot of Facebook groups that are nationwide. Facebook market farming groups and things like that. And pricing is a common question on those, and people are pretty open about what they're charging, and it's always eye-opening. You know, one thing that I saw recently, people were talking about pricing of beets. It was a bundle of beets, and we've been around $3, $3 to $4, depending on the size of the beets and how colorful they are and so on, for years. And most people have. That's a pretty common, nationwide, that's a fairly common price. It's about a pound. So, you know, it come out about $3 or $4 a pound. That's pretty good. And there was this conversation about how lumber and metal and fertilizer and seed have all gone up, seriously gone up in the last year. And this conversation that happened between farmers online was, so what are we going to charge for beets? Because that's kind of one of those metrics everybody can go, well, I'm going to charge for beets. And people are saying, I think I'm going to go to $5 a bundle. And, you know, there were a couple people that said, oh, I don't think I can get that. But most people said, you know, that probably makes sense because we're paying more for everything we're buying. It's, you know, labor is getting higher. Nothing's getting cheaper. So why would we not be charging $5 a bundle for beets? And now, you know, we want to stay very firmly away from any kind of price fixing, this idea of like all of us colluding and what we're going to charge. But we also want to be aware of the market, things changing around us. And yeah, if it's going to cost me more to do everything I do, you know, then I need to be charging more for what I produce. So those initial conversations happen around walking a market, walking the produce aisle, figuring out where you can fit and your value. Then you start nailing it down through the sieve of how much time and money does it take me to grow this thing. And then you got to make sure to revisit those prices regularly. And so don't stall out. You know, don't be the 45-year-old farmer who's selling things for the same price he sold them for 15 years ago. You know, you got to, somewhere along the line, you got to start bumping that stuff up. Also, yeah, and then again, you know, don't be afraid to be the price leader in terms of top dollar. We have plenty of people who walk out of our booth and say, I can get that cheaper at Walmart. And my loving response is, please do. I have no problem with you buying cheaper food somewhere else. This is just not what I'm selling. and that's okay. Along those lines too, one more thing I'll mention about that, and I think it's a good time to take a tour after that because it's going to rain on us. I do not like discounting stuff at the end of the day. It's not that we don't ever do it, but it's not my favorite. And the reason it's not my favorite is because the value of my product didn't change because it's the end of the day. And if I train my customers to think that if they wait until the last minute and come back and buy, then I'm going to sell it to them at rock bottom prices, I'm doing myself a disservice. I would generally rather keep my price the same and give stuff away at the end of the day. And I'll even give it away to customers. I mean, I'm not at all opposed to somebody coming in at the end of the day. They buy that last bundle of carrots and I say, hey, would you like a head of lettuce to go with that free? It's on the house. And boy, I mean, you just made a great customer, right? They're thrilled. And it cost me nothing because that head of lettuce was compost if I took it home. So thinking about that, thinking about ways to keep your price point where it is, but be generous also. I don't want to be haggled down to being generous. I just want to give generously, freely. Maybe that's my personal prejudice too, but anyway, but as you walk around, watch for good examples of that vertical stacking and just generally look for which booth makes me want to jump in, which booth makes me want to engage with that person, which farmers are doing a good job of engaging with that person or with a customer or myself or whatever it is. Not just farmers, vendors in general. So those are good questions to ask yourself as you walk through. And then also, you know, we can do a mental exercise here. Let's see what bundles of radishes are going for. I'm curious, or you know, pick another different product if you want, but it'll be interesting to see how much variation there is, because there is going to be some. And then also you can notice, can you tell that walking by? Or do you have to stop and ask? And so we'll do that. So we got to this corner 4 or 5 years ago, and so our market assigns location by seniority, but mostly by income. So you get a few points for being here for multiple years, but most of your points come from how much income you make in each year. My wife is the best displayer of all. She's really good at it, but she gets everything up. She keeps it interesting to look at, and she's really responsible for the color schemes as well. She's always bought. She has a bunch of different tablecloths in the market stuff, and so we change it out. And she'll, you know, try and be aware. Like if we've got tomatoes, we'll try and display them on something not red, And if we've got greens, then putting them on something bright colored is great. So, and the flowers are so. Do you do flowers at all right now? Well, don't jump into them unless you want to, but they are very profitable and an easy sell. We really like these little signs, these little clips. We have found them to be a really slick, I mean, they stay in place. I hope you've enjoyed our time here at the market. I think there's a lot of value to be gained from understanding how to sell at a market. Really can make the difference between your farm succeeding or failing in a farmer's market setting. If you enjoyed it and you want to see more of this content, please make sure you subscribe, like the videos, help us build a following so we can produce more videos and share more of this information with you.